saved the day today when our others program couldn't be here, and he's going to be speaking or taking questions for about 30 minutes or so, and then he gets to be a lawyer after that, and earn a living. And then Kerra Lindbloom is going to have some remarks that she also gave at the courthouse yesterday about John Lewis Day and John Lewis. So David doesn't need much of an introduction, but he is a Democrat and he does represent the 46th district in Columbia, and he was elected in a special election in 2021. As I mentioned, he is an attorney and he practices and is a founding member of Smith and Parnell, which I got to read about today when I was looking him up. I do need a lawyer, David. I don't have one. But going on, he got his undergraduate degree in sociology at MU, and then he went to Tulane for law school. He's also been a member of the community, serving on the Ragtag board. He helped form the police review board. He's also on, I hope it still exists, David, he was appointed to the Missouri Advisory Committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights. Really glad you're participating in that. He grew up in Columbia and he's a CUPE. So I'll let you take it from there, David, on whatever you wish to speak on.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. That was unnecessary, but I appreciate it. Yeah, just let me know, as far as needing an attorney, just call my office, let me know what you're charged with, and we'll get working on it. What your criminal charges are. That's a joke. Yeah, one of the things that I try to, just communicate to people, and I think we all know this to some degree, intuitively. I mean, we all kind of get it. But I really want to stress the importance of kind of where we are in this country and what we need to do. I know a lot of times, as Democrats, and I'm sure people on the other side of the aisle do it too, you tend to show up and you give a rah-rah speech, and you try to encourage people, and you try to encourage people to mobilize. That's just kind of what you do. You'll get asked, hey, come to this event and speak and get people to turn out for the vote. But the thing is, what we're facing now is so much different than what we faced in years past. And it's kind of been an incremental creep. When I talk about the dangers of our democracy crumbling, this is real. And it's not, get people out to vote. And, I remember a few years ago, I think Hillary Clinton said, vote like your life depended on it. And that was great. And I think that's true to some degree, but I think more so now what we're facing in this country. Donald Trump, and I saw this coming years ago. A lot of people said he wouldn't get elected. I was like, I'm not so sure. I mean, that far right-wing base of his is so rabid. I mean, the fact, and one of the things is, as far as Democrats, we tend to be in denial a lot. Before the election, oh no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I remember seeing pictures on like TikTok and whatnot, videos of not only people standing in line to see him, or the crowds coming to see this man, but they were standing in line for hours. I mean, it's one thing to go to a movie and say, I'll go to a movie when it's crowded. It's another thing to stand in line for hours to see a movie. And that's a problem. And so that far right core he's got is obviously having a huge play. And obviously the middle is, the middle controls things, but when you have such a huge right-wing following, that's a huge problem, as we all know. And again, I know we all, I'm kind of preaching to the choir to some degree, but I think a lot of people, this is not business as usual. And the trick is to communicate to people and tell people this is not politics as usual. I mean, this man is consolidating power. So one of the first things that dictate, and the thing is when you call him Hitler or whatever, or say he's like, these are Nazis, people get up in arms and they say, oh, they're the liberals, the libs go exaggerating, here they go again. But folks, if you look at the signs of all the things he's doing, curtailing the media, not allowing certain media entities to participate, shutting people out. Like he did that with, I think, an AP journalist. AP is fairly mainstream. This is not far left media. So another thing you have to do is you have to control the military. And I thought about this prior to the election. I thought, well, if he gets in power, he's not just going to be able to have his complete way because, the military is not going to go along with him. Well, what is one of the first things he did? He got rid of one of the top generals, maybe in the Joint Chief of Staffs, but he got rid of him. He was, African American gentleman, and people thought, well, it's because of race. Well, that was only partly true. The main part of it was to make sure you had a MAGA person underneath you, because if you can control the military, then you can have your complete way with this nation. And that's another thing he did. And then James Comey's daughter, who's a prosecutor in the Epstein case, fired her yesterday. I mean, he is getting all these people in place, and this aggressiveness he has, and how the retribution, how everyone's terrified of him. I was listening to, if you ever have a chance, on XM radio, there's a station called POTUS. It's Politics of the United States, and it tends to be fairly balanced. I like listening to it, but they talked about I can't remember who it was. I think it was a U.S. senator or somebody who was going to run for Congress, and they basically said, Trump is our coach. I'm not going to run. Basically, what he was saying is, unless he says I should run. I mean, they are following this guy. They're worshiping him, and they're terrified of him. The thing is that just think about the power he had when he wasn't even in office. In between these terms, the Republicans were still looking to him to see what to do. They were still, going along with his lead. And now they are they're following. I mean, just look at Mark Rubio, how he came out and said all those negative things about Trump, and now he's just like marching a line with them. They will not get out of line at all. And they're completely okay with what's going on with ICE. Mark Alford spoke at this. I was glad, I talked with, I had a chance to talk with him, and I said, look, come out and talk to people. People want to see you. You don't have to be afraid of people. He did have a town hall, but one of the things he said is, someone criticized him about the ICE people having masks, and he said, well, during COVID you had masks and you liked it. What's the problem with masks now? And I'm like, are you really going to compare COVID masks for health to people jumping out of vans with their faces covered, snatching people? I mean, seriously. So we really need to, the problem is, again, we started saying this a long time ago, that there was a problem, and people, oh, there they go again. We have a problem. And I said this last time, I've said this before. Donald Trump has no plans of leaving the White House. Okay. He's got merchandise that says 2028 on it. He is planning on staying. And he will concoct something. So he doesn't do it the constitutional way. He'll say, well, there's a voting issue. We have to investigate. He'll make up a lie, and his people will just go with it. That's a problem. This is a problem. And so one of the things we can do, we've got to take Congress back at midterms. That's at least one body that can fight him, because the Democrats in Congress, they can ask for investigations, whatever, they can do that. But without having Congress, he's just going to run roughshod. And he is not planning on leaving. He's going to stay. And he's got those, so then freeing the January 6th people. Now he's got his own little militia out there. They're going to support him. That's all very calculated. And the sad thing is, in times past, we've had a few people that would stand up to power, right? Elizabeth Cheney, at least she stood up to him. I know that probably killed her political career, but I'm not seeing that. Years past, we've had one or two people, even Romney stood up a few years back. We don't have that. There's nobody out there really that's willing to stand up to him in his own party. And he's got this ICE army, that January 6th people that he's endorsing and, let them go, firing people at whim. We have got to stop this man. And and what he's doing with the courts. And not only that, but we've got this runaway U.S. Supreme Court. And I know I'm digressing a little bit, but I remember when those justices were being confirmed and they're asked about abortion and what they were going to do. The same time, well, stare decisis, you have to follow the law and everything. But what was really troubling to me is, obviously once they get in on the court, they can do whatever they want to do, but it was how they did it. If you looked at, and I think it was Barrett, when she was being interviewed, it was very like, very decisive, very kind of benign. Stare decisis meaning you have to follow the law of the land. You're not going to overturn precedent like Roe v. Wade. And if watching her, she was very, stare decisis, nothing unusual. But when you read that opinion where they overturned Roe, the hatred they had for it. Now, I understand if they didn't like it. I get it. That's their job. They're conservatives. They may not like it. But the hatred which they wrote that opinion that overturned that, you could tell that they hated it, They wanted it to go. The time has come. It was a completely different mentality than what we saw in those confirmation hearings. I mean, these people, I mean, like, at least be intellectually honest during the hearing. You may not say exactly what you're going to do, but at least let us know your feelings. And if you read that opinion, I mean, it is the vitriol with Roe. I mean, they hated it. They knew what they wanted to do. They talked about how it was ridiculous. I mean, it's like they were sitting there waiting to pounce. And they basically misled the American people when they were being confirmed. They probably would have been confirmed anyway, but at least there would have been some. We've had some guidance. So you've got that Supreme Court that's now saying that federal judges can't stop him. That's another thing that's going on. So the federal judges now, the court said, well, you know, they can't stop a lot of his executive orders. And on Fox News or wherever they're saying, yeah, you know, we don't want to run away federal branch. We don't run away activist judges. Well, guess what, folks? Do you know what it's called when someone stops a president? It's called checks and balances. That's called separation of powers, checks and balances. Our government is designed to do that. Our government is designed for the courts to stop the president. That's the whole point. It's to have safeguards, guardrails, so he can't just do whatever he wants. And the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court acts like they're totally oblivious to this, and they're just going to do whatever they're just doing his bidding left and right. I mean, every time you look at the news, another decision that's way in. So we have to be prepared. We have to educate people. And I think because so long we've talked about him, we don't like him, people kind of, you know, toned up. Oh, here the liberals go again. Here they go again. No. This man is, and here's another piece that people need to understand too. You think, well, why is he so desperate to stay in power? So, I mean, men like power generally, but women too. I mean, people like power, but he's basically a caged animal because he'll probably, so if he gets out of the only thing that's keeping him out of prison is the White House, right? Remember all the criminal charges that were against him? A lot of the judges, when he got elected, a lot of the judges folded after he was elected. They didn't pursue it. They just kind of slapped him on the wrist. He had these huge civil suits against him. Remember? I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars he had to pay. Then he got in with Elon Musk and he's selling all these weird coins and making more money. But the point is, outside of the White House, he's done. Once he's a regular civilian, he's probably going to get charged again, especially the Democrats take power, right? He's done. He's going to get charged again. He's probably going to have more civil suits. He's going to lose all his money. So he can't go anywhere. And he knows that. His only safeguard is to stay in the White House, which I don't know if we've ever seen that before with the president, where they can't leave. I know with Hillary, they talked about lock her up, but realistically, you knew she wasn't going to jail or anything. But I don't know if we've ever seen this in modern history of a president that really can't leave. Because if he leaves, he's in trouble. So he's going to do whatever he can because he has no other options. And he's mad, he's vindictive. And so we need to plan on, I mean, if we don't win the midterms, we're in big trouble because these Republicans are not showing any type of backbone or spine whatsoever across the board. They're just not doing it. And they're terrified of him. And, you know, they want to stay in power too. They're going to go along with it. So that's basically a long spiel. But I talk about that at different venues. And it's not just to rally up the crowd or get people excited or people shout. It's that we need to vote. We need to get people energized. We need to talk to people. You know, this is like Winston Churchill in the late 30s and early 40s warning about Adolf Hitler. I mean, that's really what it is. And people thought, oh yeah, here he goes again. Yeah, he's not here. You know, they just weren't listening to him. I'm not saying I'm Winston Churchill. I'm just saying the idea of this man, of Trump and what he's doing. So we have to be vigilant. We have to vote. We have to get people engaged. And we can win. This is not some horrible dark cloud, but what I'm saying is now is the time. I mean, what you're doing, I mean, you're heroes showing up time and time again. And, you know, I know sometimes the mainstream, they're just out there worried about their own lives and going to work and they don't really think about it. Sometimes it's election time. But I appreciate what you're doing. And I appreciate that you're engaged and you're involved and you're showing up because this is serious. I mean, this is serious business. And the problem is people aren't going to realize it. I mean, especially a lot of people in the Latin American community supported Trump, but now they're getting yanked off and, anyway. So what I was saying is we are in perilous times. We are in perilous times, just like we were in the 30s and 40s. And we have got to stop him. Anyway, anyone have any questions or anything?
Well, I absolutely agree with you, David, and I'm really concerned about how we wake other people up. Because,
Right.
like you said, people are just going about their lives thinking that the most important thing is, do I have enough income to buy buy a house, and
Right.
um, all of those kinds of things. And certainly, having a home, having food on your table, that is important. But that's going to be challenged if we lose our democracy. And I don't know how we
Right.
can wake people up.
Right. Right. And the interesting thing, Kathy, too, is that and we've all seen this, is that Trump will say something, and he puts out feelers, right? So he'll say he's going to do something to see if there's any appetite for it, and then if people jump on it, then he'll come back. Like when he talked about remember when he was running, he said, "This is the last time we're going to have to vote. We're going to fix this. Is the last time we're going to have to do it." And then when he was challenged about it, well, he may back off a little bit. He may not. He changes the subject. He puts that out there to see if there's appetite, and then he moves towards it. If there is appetite, there is. And it's interesting you say that, because I've said that to people, like, hey, or someone, look, he said this. Well, yeah, and I mean the problem is, the pro-life organization. I understand. I understand. I mean, I'm not saying that people don't have an opinion about abortion and whatnot, but it's like there's no middle ground. There's no exception. I mean, they're just like, you can't. They're not to be reasoned with, and they've got everyone convinced that any form of abortion is murder, and and it's one of the problems is that's become entwined in the Christian churches. If those two things go hand in hand, it's not necessarily true. Not necessarily true. And if you look at the Bible, the scriptures talk about. I mean, the Bible says there's a time to kill. I mean, we kill, and so what I'm saying, but it's that idea has been woven into the fabric of people's beliefs that they think that God is against any type of abortion all the time, and I'm not sure that's true. But that movement is, they're just there's no equivocation or middle ground, and that people. I've often said this, and I've said this before Trump got elected. I said, if the devil, and I'm a Christian, I'm a person of faith. So this isn't an attack on Christianity. I go to church, I'm a person of faith. But if the devil, this is before Trump, the devil himself, who said he was the devil, ran as a pro-life candidate, he would have a large number of people who call themselves Christians, I believe, would vote for the devil. He said, I am the devil. There are people that go to church. I'm not saying they're real Christians. I'm just saying there are people that go to church. I'm not attacking Christianity, who call themselves that would vote for him because of that issue has become such an idol to so many people. And like I'm a Christian, I'm a person of faith. This is not a knock attack on Christianity. I'm just saying there are individuals who I feel like are very misguided in the Christian church. But so, yeah, but right, getting people to wake up and to see the light about what is happening before it's too late. I mean, we have got to get people to see the light about what's happening and get involved. And I know there's some hands up, but let me tell you something quickly too. And a lot of it has to do with, because I know we get frustrated. We say, well, how do we get people to vote? How do we get, I know the last election cycle was very discouraging. I mean, just across the board, all the statewide, Missouri got hammered. And one of the things I think we have to have an economic focus, but I think more so focus on economics, but, and it's getting people out to do it. The thing is, we can do this. The trick is believing, right? If we believe we can do it, we can. It's kind of like the old adage, if you believe you can do something, you can. If you believe you can't, you can't. And I think about it, this example, it's kind of like if there was a race, statewide, state senate, whatever, Congress, whatever, and I said, hey, make out candidate Joe. Joe's running, he's a Democrat, you like him, but he's down 8 points. And that's what the poll said. Well, when Joe comes to you for money, think, well, Joe's down 8 points, he's not going to win. I'll give him $50 as opposed to $200. When Joe asks you to knock doors, well, he's not going to win. He's down 8 points. I'll knock, 3 hours. I won't do it all day. Well, I won't have, I'll have a smaller fundraiser for him. I won't call all my friends because he's going to lose. I'll just do it to say I did something because he's going to lose. On election day, what do? Polls come out, he's down 8 points. I'll vote. Won't really call many people. I might take, one relative with me. I'll vote just to do that. Well, guess what? Joe's losing by 8 points. But if I told you, as opposed to that poll, what if you released a poll and said, you know what? This election's going to be 50-50. It's going to come down to 5 votes. It's so tight, it's going to come down to 5 votes. Well, then when Joe shows up and he says, hey, can I have money? As opposed to the $50, you give him $200. When he says, can you knock doors for me? Because it's going to come down to 5 votes. You don't do 2-hour shift, you do all day. You might call all your friends for the fundraiser because it's going to come down to 5 votes. And on election day, because it's going to come down to 5 votes, you call 20 people. Well, guess what happens? When all the people in Joe's circle do that, who show up at the rallies do that, call the 20 people, give the extra, have the bigger fundraiser, not only does Joe win that 50-50 race, Joe would have won that race where he was down 8. Because it's about people believing and coming out. If Joe had that support when he was down 8, Joe wins that race. But it's just the idea of if we think we can do it, then we kind of go out 40-50%. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Hands are up.
David Mallory, you want to ask your question?
Thanks. I think Dave did a lot toward answering just then, but maybe there's more. I was going to say, what specifically do you think we as Democrats should or could do to influence midterm elections that we haven't already been doing? I've just been involved with the local Democratic Party since Trump got elected the first time, so about 8 years now, maybe a little bit more. And I feel like we do the same thing every election. And yeah, here in Boone County, it's working for us. The gerrymandering kind of helped a lot too. But what else can we do other than just you're suggesting do more of what we've been doing?
Yeah, I think do more of what we've been doing. I think we need to get out into some of these other areas. I know, like, where there's Ashland parades, we need to go to some of these rural areas and get a presence. A lot of these people in these rural areas don't have, Democrats have abandoned those areas because they feel like we can't win. We need to go out to some of those areas. That's something I'm going to try to do, is get out to some of these other areas and help people in these rural areas around the state with their problems. People will post on my social media, hey, I'm having trouble with this, and go out there. I may need to go out there. I'm going to try to go out and maybe even talk to local law enforcement agencies in rural counties around the state, just so there's a presence there. But I think we could do that too. So we can do what we have to do in Boone County, but we can also get out and maybe do something else in other places. Maybe have, why couldn't we do some type of chili supper somewhere else, like up in Macon or, Moberly, or, you know what I mean? Organize an event up there and get those people out. Because here's the trick, friends. To win statewide, we don't need a majority in those rural areas. What we need is we need to turn out Kansas City, St. Louis, Columbia, Springfield Democrats. We need to get about 30% out there. So we don't need to dominate. Like, we don't need to get 75% in Macon or in the Boot Hill. But if we can get a third, and we can turn out here, so we turn out Boone, turn out the cities, we will start winning statewide again. So we just can't abandon rural areas, and we've been bad about that. And I think another thing, David, I think it's messaging. When you're behind, which we are, we have to focus on economics, because those are issues that everybody can relate to. I think sometimes some of the social issues we got to be careful about. Like when Bill Clinton, we think it's bad now. I mean, there was 8 years of Reagan, 4 years of Bush. I mean, can you imagine having 12 years of Republican president? We've had, before we had, 8 of Obama, 4 of Trump, 4 of Biden, and now we got Trump again. But imagine, I know we all lived through that. I mean, most of us, 12 years of Republican rule. And Bill Clinton said, remember, the economy, stupid, right? It was about economics. He focused on the economy. And hopefully Trump, derails the economy with these tariffs. Let me back that up. I don't want the economy to be derailed, because I don't want our country to suffer. I love our country. That's not what I mean. But if the economy is in bad shape, that's helpful to us. And we don't want a bad economy. I don't mean that. But these tariffs are a nightmare. And so we have to focus on economic issues, because Democrats, Republicans, everyone cares about economics. I'll tell you a funny story. So I was getting my car fixed about a few years ago, or getting a tire replaced or something. And I was in this garage, and I could tell the person who worked there, I could tell he was a Republican. I just got the sense, probably Trump guy, whatever. And I said, just basically give it to me. What is it? Tell me what you want. Tell me how you feel. What's on your mind? Give it to me. Why don't you like Biden? Biden, tell me. And I just let him give it to me. And he was angry, and he said, a bag of groceries used to get, for $70, you got 3 or 4 bags of groceries. Now you just get one. It's economics. You know, it's about the grocery bill. People can relate to that. And I took that message to other, and I talked to other groups about that as a Republican message, and people that resonates with people. You know, and so that's a big overlapping circles, economics. So I think that's one of the things we have to do strategically is not only get into those areas, but focus on money, because that affects everybody. And then you can deal with those other issues once you're in power.
Alice?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Focus on money, right, economics, but so David, I read in the New York Times yesterday, and I wonder if this is going to be a playbook for most of the Republican states, that Texas is calling a special session to look at legislative districts. I guess they want more of them. And the Democrats are saying, we're not going to show up. It's being talked about. And he said, I will chase down and arrest any Democrat that doesn't show up. Can you see this happening in Missouri? I think this could be their playbook to make the elections less fair and much harder for us to win.
Yeah,
Comment.
that's terrifying. I mean, no, that's terrifying. I know we talked about that yesterday. Looked at that. That is terrifying that they don't wait the 10 years for the census to redistrict. You know, just in your personal experience. I mean, the sense of powerless down there in Jefferson City sometimes. So when they did redistricting the last time, and they drew that line down the middle of Columbia, and because they're splitting it up. Here we've got Boone County is doing great. We're blue, and it was going to be hard to win anyway congressionally there. I mean, the idea was, you know, I talked to someone years ago and they said this. The idea, like, to win one of those seats, like Hartzler's seat, the math was if you got complete turnout in Boone County, you would still only get 44% of the vote. Now things change and maybe you can get a little more now, but other people know that too, that was close for us. I mean, and who knows what change, you get a bad Republican candidate, maybe you win that. But to draw that line down Broadway and to break up Boone County, I was on the House floor. I fought against that. I argued against that. The guy who presented that proposal was Dan Schall, who was the chairman of the elections committee that I was on. And I got up on the microphone and said, this is a joke. This is a joke. And afterwards, it's funny, his feelings were hurt, I guess. He said, I can't believe you said it was a joke. I mean, say you don't like it, but to say a joke, like that was offensive to him. Well, it's offensive what you're doing to Columbia. So to answer your question, Alice, that is terrifying that they would do that. But the feeling of helplessness when you're down there and they're pushing bad legislation through, and all you can do is get up and talk about it, and then they voted through anyway. And then they cut off debate by the movie for the previous question to PQ. That's maddening to me. Now in Texas, they did this before. They can leave the state because it did not give them a quorum. So I guess that's what you have to do. You have to leave the state. And so if that crap comes up, you have to leave the state. They did that. You get on a plane and you leave the state, and so they don't have a quorum to push it through. I mean, if they're gonna, that's one of the worst things to talk about cheating. I mean, changing the rules. I mean, this party, first of all, this party, I've seen all kinds of things. Like, so just in Jefferson City, say they can't get a bill through committee. Sometimes they'll form another committee to get the bill through. I mean, they do all kinds of shady things. It's like, what's the point of even having these rules if you're going to do that? So, yeah, that's terrifying, Alice. They're doing that in Texas. Hopefully they don't, as it keep going. So my time's almost up. We've got a great Kerra's late in the week. She's ready to.
I just want to comment. You know, the election in 2 years is critical, but Trump has done a hell of a lot of damage in 6 months. He can do a whole lot more in 18 months. Right. How do we stop things? And I mean, to me, the answer, part of that answer is make Republican office holders more afraid of us than they are of him. But how do we go about doing this?
Well, I think here's the thing. You know, Mandela said some things are impossible until they're done. In other words, sometimes you don't think there's a crack in a wall, but there is. I think the Epstein thing is a problem for the Trump administration. That's a problem. It's a bigger problem than I thought it was. Now, I heard someone say, well, we don't really know what the true MAGA people are really thinking, you know, at their kitchen tables, basically, but that's a problem. So you keep pushing back. I think, you know, people say, you know, like someone said the other day about these rallies, well, you know, just going to a rally doesn't make a difference. It does make a difference. that makes a difference. When you show up and there's visibility, it creates a chink in their armor. And eventually, maybe they don't go as far. I mean, even Josh Hawley, I think, starting to backpedal about the rural hospital piece. He knows he stepped in it. And so that's a good sign for us. That means that they're not going to go completely that far and make them afraid. Like I said, keep showing up, keep doing your part. And I think we'll get to the other side. And you're right about the damage. You know, I was talking to someone, they told me that too, the amount of things that he's doing is going to be so hard to undo. I mean, taking things that have been in place for 50 years and just undermining them. So anyway, what's 12:30, guys? So I'll let you. But the message, though, there is hope. First of all, I wouldn't be doing this just like you wouldn't be. If I didn't believe, I didn't have hope, I wouldn't be doing it. I believe that we're going to get to the other side of this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be wasting my time. I wouldn't be
David,
doing it.
can we do it without PBS, public broadcasting?
Well, that's another problem, but yes, we can. It's difficult.
Okay.
Obviously, we need that, but hopefully that doesn't go all the way through. But anyway, there is hope, my friends. I think if we're valiant and we're vigilant, we'll get to this. I believe that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So keep it going. I appreciate you guys and all your hard work, and don't give up. All right.
And thank you so much for coming on and
Sure.
sharing with us on short notice.
Absolutely. Good luck to you guys. Good luck. See you.
Thank you, David.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I wanted to introduce our second speaker, who also rose to the occasion last night after she gave a wonderful writing about John Lewis. And so we are going to speak to the younger generation today, probably the youngest we've had on one of our calls for a while. Kerra Lindbloom is here with us today. She's a recent graduate this past May of Rockbridge High School. Give it for Rockbridge, my son's alma mater. She was involved in extracurricular organizations while she was there, speech and debate, service organizations, like Rockbridge Reaches Out. And then she joined the League of Women Voters, probably one of their younger members also. And she worked on registering students at Rockbridge to vote, as well as participating in candidate election forums by questioning school board candidates. And we've seen that at some of David Lyle's events. This fall, she's going to be studying a really low subject, neuroscience at Emory University in Georgia, which is really exciting that she'll be doing that. So let's hear it for Kerra. She's going to talk to us about what she said yesterday about John Lewis. Thanks for being here, Kerra.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is everyone able to hear me all right?
Yep, you sound great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so hi, my name is Kerra Lindbloom. I'm so honored to be here. Yesterday I was given the opportunity to speak at the John Lewis Vigil, and so today I'm here to share those words as well as explain my perspective as a young voter in America. So yesterday, people across the nation joined marches, rallies, and protests at more than 1,500 sites to protest against, our current administration and to honor the legacy of the late John Lewis, who, as you guys probably know, was an advocate for voting rights and civil disobedience. And this day of action, where like good trouble lives on, kind of made me think about how that history of that trouble has been honored in our present classrooms, and how, in my past 4 years, learning about this country's history in public education, I've learned so much about, the marches, protests, and most importantly, the people who refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice. And I think sitting in those classrooms, I often wondered, what kind of person does it take to continue to keep walking even when the world tells you to stop? And I really do think that, John Lewis showed us that answer. And just to recite some of the lines from the speech, I talked a lot about Bloody Sunday, right? And how John Lewis showed us that answer specifically through that morning on March 1965, where he stood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and there he faced a line of state troopers armed with clubs and hatred, and these men tried to force him into submission with violence simply because he believed in a society where every person should be able to cast a ballot free from fear. But I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, and the atrocities of this day were especially horrifying. But I wanted to know just how, John Lewis didn't give up, because he still stood up after he was beaten down. So, what kind of person did John Lewis have to be to keep walking when the world told him to stop in that instance? What kind of goes through the mind of someone not much older than myself right now to find the power to keep trudging through? And I found the HBO documentary titled The Soul of America, where in an interview, John Lewis recalled the horrific events of that day, including the moment where his skull was fractured. And it would have been entirely justified for him to condemn his attackers. But what instead happened is that he spoke of them with forgiveness, not because his attackers deserved forgiveness, but because, as he said in the interview, hate is too heavy a burden to bear. And I think that line really stuck with me, not because it's just poetic, but because it's an active choice. It's not about absolving his perpetrators, but it's about refusing to let their cruelty dictate his humanity. He chose love, not because it was easy, but because he knew that hatred would only chain him to the very forces he fought against. And I think that's what I found most inspiring about John Lewis in my research. It was this unwavering truth that justice can't be built on a foundation of bitterness, and that justice is built and won through love. I think this concept of forgiveness is often seen as passive or naive, but I don't think it's either of those things. I think it's this most radical act of courage. It's about breaking a cycle of violence and refusing to let oppression dehumanize all actors in a situation. Forgiveness isn't about excusing harm, it's about reclaiming that power over one's own humanity. And I think forgiveness is really powerful in that regard. I think I often hear the term that ordinary people can spark change, but I don't think that's entirely true. I mean, it should be ordinary to want equality and to love everyone equally enough to care about themselves, to care about them more than yourself. But in our present reality, it doesn't seem like that's all that ordinary. And that's really disappointing. But for John Lewis, to stare down violence and to keep faith in the recovery of a system, in a society that has only betrayed you, that is extraordinary. Much like all of the foot soldiers for civil rights needed to be. Because the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, these weren't gifts bestowed by benevolent politicians. They were won by extraordinary people like John Lewis, who never gave up on the fight, the battle to forge a more prosperous, equitable democracy, where he spent the rest of his life guarding the right to vote, which, in his words, was the most powerful, nonviolent tool of our democracy. But even today, that tool is under attack. Laws are being passed attempting to make voting harder and inaccessible. Protests are being criminalized and barriers are rising where bridges ought to be built. When I turned 18, the joy of getting to vote in my next election was quickly overshadowed by the news that in November, I'd be voting on if I as an 18-year-old girl, wanted to have the choice to have a say over my own body. I think about how lucky or naive I must have been when I was younger to not know that I had to vote my own autonomy into existence and fight to keep it there in the first place. It's hard to find the motivation to participate in a system that has been built by generations older than I am when standing here, it's perpetually hard to feel protected by it. But thankfully, figures like John Lewis showed us the blueprint to be just as extraordinary, to observe all of this chaos all around and still not grow complacent, and to reject the forces that seek to further divide us. In the words of John Lewis, do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It's the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. And while good trouble is a really iconic part of that quote, I particularly like that first line. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Because the reality is, the legacy that John Lewis built isn't based on immediate gratification. It's enduring progress. It's about a commitment to not get lost in a sea of cynicism and inaction. And especially now, more than ever, I think those words ring so true. It's about a dedication to not allow ourselves to become fatigued, even when it's difficult to be optimistic, to have the strength to continue to show up and to keep asking questions, even when our current administration wishes that you don't. And I'll admit, sometimes I'm scared, right? As a teenager stepping into adulthood, I look around at our society today and see division, hatred, and laws that seem designed to silence marginalized and vulnerable communities. But figures like John Lewis reminds me and remind us that hope isn't naive. Hope is stubborn. It's choosing to believe that we can continue to build something better even when the road ahead is uncertain. It's finding that courage to be optimistic and to take action. I think I found optimism and that very same optimism when I joined the League of Women Voters as a student advisor on the advisory board on the education committee. Being surrounded by empowered women in my community that I hadn't really gotten to see before, that just cared so deeply about political mobilization and education on major public policy issues to influence that same public policy was an intimate, true introduction to democracy, to the democracy that I know we can fight for. And it's given me this optimism to believe that it's so worth it. Being able to host voter registration drives at my school, where we spoke to hundreds of my peers and registered so many, it was just another important perspective of that democracy at work. It's actually pretty funny to me that I'm here right now speaking because the reason I was invited to join the league was because of something I said to a journalist for our school newspaper. I said that the reason young people aren't wanting to participate in democracy is because right now we're bombarded and exposed to so much information about how the world is on fire and how everything is horrible, and the very people who voters elected to fix these things aren't doing enough, or anything at all. It makes this political process feel increasingly overwhelming and inaccessible. But now, and especially hearing those words from our very own representative, I view that as a source of empowerment because there are people fighting for us. And I think the reason I see that as a source of empowerment now is best phrased by John Lewis himself. He has this great quote that's very concise, but speaks to the situation we're in right now. And it's, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? I think in a commencement speech to the 2014 graduates of Emory University, he challenged this point even more. And he issued a challenge not just to them, but to all of us. And I want to pull an excerpt from that speech. Quote, "You must understand that there are forces that want to take us back another period. But you must say we're not going back. We've made too much progress and we're going forward. There may be some setbacks, some delays, some disappointment, but you must never, ever give up. You must keep faith, to keep your eyes on the prize. That is your calling. That is your mission. That is your moral obligation. That is your mandate. Get out there and do it. Get in the way." End quote. I'm committed to continue to make good, necessary trouble and to fill up space, to get in the way. Because in this country, the power really does lie with the people, and it's up to us to never stop proving it. And if you guys have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you, Vera. That was great. Can I ask sort of my question? I did think you would inspire us to have you here today, since your audience was very inspired last night. You will be very helpful in Georgia. There's a very important Senate race with John Ossoff, also the youngest member of the Senate. And I think that he's the only incumbent something in a race, whatever. He's in a tough spot. And so you'll be very helpful rallying around members at your university and continuing to do this work. So, and I do want to invite you, and then that's really my statement. We do have that weekly protest at 10:30 at Crossroads Stadium and Broadway every week. This one's sponsored by the Boone County Democrats. And it would be wonderful if you'd show up with a few youth, because we do tend to be seniors. and then we go, and you should look on our website, or I'll send it to you. We go and do an action, kind of like the AIDS activists of the 70s and 80s. And we go to the Providence Road overhang and post these large letters that last week it said "Stop ICE." And we put that, and the trucks are honking and tons of people see it. And we're trying to think of other creative things, if you can think of them, that would appeal to people wanting more direct action. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for inviting me.
Anyone else? Question?
Well, this is Kathy Jensen, and I wanted to ask Kerra what you see as ways to awaken the disenchanted and discouraged people your age that feel like there may be no hope to take action. I'm just wondering what you think we can do as Democrats to reach out to them.
In my experience registering people, a lot of the times these young students at my school didn't realize that their voice had a direct impact, especially on their local elections, right? I think a lot of these young people, speaking as a young person, right? We've been told our whole lives that the big election is who you want to be as president, right? And we don't really understand that there's a lot of very important local elections that are basically always happening within our own community, right? And so something that I saw that was really cool during those registration drives was us just not only registering these people, but telling them what's on the ballot. And I think giving them a reason to care about those specific issues, to want their voice to be heard, really inspired these people to go out and vote. I think right now a barrier to a lot of young people wanting to participate in our democracy is they think participation either means that their vote is going to be wasted in the electoral college, or that they have to go out with a megaphone and yell at all the people that don't agree with them, right? And I think that there are many different ways to actually, participate in our government that aren't just that. And so I think when we talked to these young voters, they ended up kind of realizing that as well, right? Realizing that, there are propositions and amendments that could alter how they end up spending the rest of their lives in Missouri, And I think by explaining the short-term impacts to these people, like including myself, right, that haven't been around for a long time, kind of puts things into a better perspective, because I think it's easy as young people for us to separate the long-term consequences of our political actions, because we just, we wake up, we go to school, we sit in classroom, then we go home, we go to sleep, right? It's hard to, put ourselves in that narrative and see it as um us being a cog as a citizen in this like machine of our government, right? And so once, you emphasize, and something that we did was emphasize, starting with the short-term impacts of those political decisions, we saw a lot more engagement. And additionally, I saw a lot of my friends go out during the No Kings protest, and there were a lot of young people that actually showed up. And I think another segment of getting young people involved is the urgency, right? If young people think that their short-term future is going to be directly affected by these political decisions, I think they're more likely to show up. And I think that's why there was more youth involvement in big protests like the No Kings movement, because, our current administration is something that's basically taken up their entire lifetime, right? Of political consciousness. And I think, that's an important part of getting the youth engaged.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Oh, here, let me look in the chat. I am frequently amazed at how many people. Yeah. Can you hazard a guess? You know what? I think so. The question was, can you hazard a guess as to what the percentage of your fellow Rockbridge students are Trumpers? Some funny moments from when we were registering people. It seems as if registering young people to vote is seen as an inherently partisan action that someone can take. We would have people coming up to us and they'd be like, "Do you still want to register me? I'm gonna vote for so and so." And you know what? We were just like, you as a citizen have this civic duty to have your voice heard, right? And so to try and antagonize us with how you want to weaponize that vote is kind of telling. And I think those were very isolated cases. Um, but I think overall, the people who did want to get involved in the process were people who felt like they needed to. And I think that's another segment of it. It's less of a convenience or, an opportunity to vote now, and more of like a moral obligation. And I think a lot of students at Rockbridge were kind of feeling that. I know, like as a student, if I were to, be I don't want to say bombarded, but if I were to be repeatedly approached by these people at a booth in my media center to, are you 17 and a half? Can you register to vote? How old are you? Let's register to vote. I'd be kind of annoyed. But these people saw it as kind of a calling, and I think like right now people don't register to vote because it's not a convenience, right? And that's not telling of, not calling them like lazy or anything like that, right? It's just there's no person handing them a clipboard and saying, "Hey, like it's time to register," and it's really easy, right? Um and so to get back to your question, I don't see many outward Trumpers, if that makes sense. But there are some people with very concerning political beliefs that aren't afraid to show that. But I think on the other side, because of that, and because of that urgency, and that moral obligation that people, on the other side, believe, there's a lot of pushback to that as well. And I think, especially at Rockbridge, and something I really like, and I was having a conversation with our principal about this, maybe like 6 months ago, when I was in his office doing the morning announcements, and I was talking about, trying to promote this voter registration booth we had. And he looks at me and he goes, "Do you think here at Rockbridge we're trying to push a certain agenda or not?" And I think like him asking that question was really telling of just the amount of free political discourse that we're allowed to have at Rockbridge. And I think that's been really important, right? Um, and I don't want to say like I'm grateful for those Trumpers because I don't really believe that way. However, I'm grateful for the fact that because they exist, people that wouldn't have been so vocal in the opposition exist as well. And I think that has been really empowering as a young voter and as a student to see so many of my peers care so much about laws that don't directly affect them as well, and laws that are going to um, hurt very vulnerable communities. And I think that's the kind of hope that we need to like surround ourselves with, and the kind of hope that kind of exists, I think, across all of CPS high schools when we are able to have that kind of political discourse.
Thank you, Kara. You are inspiring, and I'm sure you'll do really well in Georgia. So thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, for sure.
And Kerra, I just wanted to add, you're quite right about a lot of young people not knowing that there's city council elections, state rep elections, incredibly important. Because I sent something like that to a checker at the grocery store. She says, "You mean I don't just get to vote for president?" And you've also made me realize we focus a lot at the university registering people to vote. I think we need to make sure there's another you that's behind at Rockbridge doing voter registration for the 18-year-olds. Extremely important, so you've really pointed that out to us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really great. Your questions were amazing.
Thank you.
We'll stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you
Kara.
guys. Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.
Well, I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the